Hey there, friend. Welcome to the living room. Welcome back to the living room. You're in for an inspiring conversation today with my brother and friend, Robert Kennedy III. Do me a favor. Would you press the subscribe button, like this video, and share it with your spheres of influence so others can be inspired by the conversations that take place in the living room? If there are specific topics that you're interested in listening to and learning about, drop them in the comments. We read them and we're looking forward to providing meaningful content for you. Well, that's all I have for now. Enjoy today's conversation. Thanks so much. Welcome to the living room, where we listen, learn, and live together. I'm your host, Richard Martin. Make yourself at home. I'm glad you're here. There's an ancient parable that tells the story of three servants who each received bags of gold. The first received 5 bags, the second received 2, and the third received 1. Now, I'm not going to go north, south, east, and west towards all the meanings of this parable, but I will share this one. It has to do with what you do with what you've been given. And our special guest has been given quite a few bags of gold, and he's doing a lot with it. I want to welcome to the living room a friend, a brother of mine, one who has, in fact, whether he knows it or not, invested in the living room himself. The living room wouldn't be here if years ago he didn't pull me aside and say, hey, you ever thought about podcasting? We're going to talk about podcasting, entrepreneurship, and many other topics that I'm sure you want to lean in and listen to today. Please welcome to the living room, Mr. Robert Kennedy III. What's going on, man?
What's going on, Doc? Good to see you, man.
You too. Glad to be here with you. And let me just first say publicly, thank you. I don't know if you remember that. It was in my office on the other side of Brinklow Church in Maryland. And you popped in just to say, what's going on? I don't think I was there, maybe 2 months. And you asked me, have you thought about doing podcasting? Brought me to your house. That was the first podcast that I had ever done before I was able to see a setup in your home studio. And it really kind of planted a lot of seeds that have been watered over the years. And so, man, I appreciate you for taking an interest in a young preacher.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes I just say stuff, man. I don't know. It's we plant seeds wherever we are.
That's it.
And hopefully they water.
Oh, yes, indeed. Man. For sure. Well, in the spirit of planting seeds and having seeds watered, let's kind of go back to the beginning and take a look at the early soil of Bobby Kennedy's life. Where were you born and raised? What's your background, man?
Man, I end up saying that, but most people don't ask. I was born on the island of Jamaica, man, and I left there when I was about 7.5 years old, and then we moved to the Bronx. And so, actually, no, that's the short story. The longer story is we left Jamaica. We lived in Queens with one of my aunts for about 2 months. Then we went to Montreal because my dad was at McGill University. Okay. And we lived in Montreal for about 1.5 years. And then we came back to New York, and my dad was pastoring in the Bronx at that time. And so we lived in the Bronx, and I was there through high school, went to college in Massachusetts. My family still lived in the Bronx, but then while I was in college, my family moved back to Canada. To Oshawa, just outside of Toronto. My dad became a vice president for Canadian Union. Okay. And so we lived in Oshawa. So I was only up there for summers pretty much at the time. And then my parents moved to Massachusetts. So we were all together there for a while. And after I got married, I lived in Massachusetts for, 8 years after I got married, and then we moved to Maryland after that.
Okay. So you've got Caribbean background, Canadian, Northeast United States. So that's kind of a hodgepodge of experiences, each having their own unique culture, which I'm sure as we'll get into the conversation more, you'll draw on some of those things and some of those placements and how it ultimately shaped what you're doing now. But are you an only child? You have brothers, sisters?
I got 2 brothers.
Okay.
2 brothers. There are 3 of us. My 3 sons. There are 3 of us.
All right.
So I just said My Three Sons and you didn't budge. That's like an old reference, like a TV show from like.
You dated yourself and both of us. I was kind of like, oh,
dude, I did. I mean, the show came out before I was born, but it was like when, you know, like when you're a kid and they have reruns from the decades before. So I think this was a show from like the 60s or the 50s or whatever. Most so definitely. When we were kids, it was definitely a rerun. So kind of like My Dream of Lucy or something.
And for me, it would be All in the Family. What is it? Good Times. I remember my parents laughing hysterically at the reruns. And for my future kids, I'm sure it's going to be Family Matters, Fresh Prince, et cetera, man.
Yeah.
So you spent, if I'm correct, the majority of your time in the formative years just before going to college in New York. What was it like growing up in New York?
Man, as a kid, you don't really know what you're in.
Okay.
And so it was just normal. We were in New York. We were uptown, as they call it. So in New York City, there are different areas. If you live in the Bronx, there's North Bronx and there's South Bronx.
Sure.
South Bronx is like, and North Bronx is not like the luxury, but it's kind of like if you're in North Bronx, they're like, you're in the suburbs.
Sure.
Some type of thing. So we lived in North Bronx. I mean, we, as kids, we were walking down main streets, Gun Hill Road, White Plains Road, to school, walking mile plus to school at like 9 years old. I'm like 9. I'm taking my brothers who are like 6 and 4 or whatever. We're all walking to school with friends and stuff. These little kids in New York City. And didn't think anything of it. And we're riding our bikes, we're outside, we're doing stuff, we're playing baseball on the street. In high school, we're taking a train or several trains, an hour and a half from the Bronx to Queens.
Wow.
For high school every day, each way. And that's life. We just don't think about it. But then you leave, you're like, wait a minute.
This is what we went through.
That was a little bit rough. I don't know if I'd have my kids do that. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I tend to like to start there with the guests and those that I have the opportunity to speak with, because I firmly believe that background helps to explain a lot that's in the foreground. And so I appreciate you kind of taking us back just to get a little peek as to where you come from, the soil in which you grew. Now, I know you and your brothers, but for those who don't, I just want to let you know, this is a musical bunch of brothers. Now, I want to know, does that come from your family? Hey, Rich, we come from a musical family, or is that kind of an anomaly? Yeah. Like, I don't know where we got this from, but thank God we did.
No, so I'm gonna try to be as nice with this as I can. Okay. So our family loves music. Sure. I'll say it that way. Our family loves music. So my dad would always tell us about how his dad had an old harp. And he would play this harp, and they had family worship, and they did so they loved to sing. They always sang. I mean, to this day, they get together, they want to sing a song like a family choir together. That's what they do. My mom's side of the family wasn't necessarily, they didn't do a lot of music together, but my mom was a really good singer. So I'll say it this way. My dad's family loved to sing. Yeah. My mom's side was more talented as far as singing goes.
I got you. I'm with you. For sure.
So we got both of that.
Okay.
We got,
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, just kind of as we begin to take a turn, I want to ask you, what's your earliest recollection of speaking in public?
Man, I'm a PK. I'm a pastor's kid. Okay. So that happens early on, whether you want it to or not.
Sure.
And so I think I must have been about 8 or 9. And you're a pastor's kid. So when they have Children's Day at church, it's a foregone conclusion, man. You got to be a part of the role.
Sure.
You're a part of the roster.
Yeah. You're going to do something.
So yeah. So I think I remember speaking when I was a little kid, and I did things like they put me up to do poems, poetry and different things like that, and I hated it. So it was nerve-wracking, and it was not so as a kid, I was pretty shy for the most part. I was, you know, even to this day, I take Myers-Briggs exams. I'm an introvert, right? So as a kid, I would rather be in my room playing with trains than being out at the party. And so when I was being put in these situations of, oh, you got to do this poem, oh, you got to speak up front, it was a nerve-wracking situation for me. Yeah.
And I'm sure that you get this a lot, that people are surprised to hear you say that you're an introvert. In fact, this is the first time that I'm hearing that. And I'm kind of taken back as well. And I learned later in my life, in fact, I think I was in college, that I would tell people I'm an extrovert. And I think I was doing that because, you know, I don't mind being in crowds, talking with people. I thought the image of an introvert was in a crowd, that person is off in a corner. And I'm like, well, that's not me. So I'm not. And they were like, no, that's not that. You know, where do you refill? Do you have a preference? If you didn't have to, where would you go? And yet I've come to learn, it's interesting. And you know this as a PK for pastors and other, you know, those persons who have a performance aspect to what they do. In many ways, I've been surprised to learn athletes, actors, politicians are introverts, which just comes as a huge surprise to me. Now, at that early age, even though you were able to perceive, man, you know, there's a level of shyness, maybe introversion, were there any early sensibilities that speaking and public speaking would kind of be in your future, or was that like the furthest thing from your mind?
I never knew it was a thing.
Okay.
I never knew it was a thing. The only thing that came close to it was I'm a PK. So when your dad is a pastor, they assume that one of the kids is one of the boys is going to follow that path. Okay. And so it was always assumed that it would be me somehow, you know, and I don't know what people saw. So when I speak, when I do more motivational talks, I tell the story of when I was 2 years old, 2.5 years old, in Jamaica. We had people in our house called helpers. And so they would always be around. They were kind of like nannies, etc. And I would always hear, Bobby, you talk too much. You talk too much. You talk too much. Why you ask so many questions, Bobby? You talk too much. You should be a lawyer. You talk too much. And I was a curious kid. I read a lot. And so I asked a lot of questions and I did a lot of questioning. And so after hearing that for a while, I shut down. I stopped talking. I was, after that point, really known as a shy kid. Now, I need to probably have this conversation with my parents. I don't know if they recognized a drastic shift in me or not. But I clearly remember that time in my life. So from then until maybe my senior year of high school, I was pretty much, you know, I had a select group of friends, small group of friends. And I did speak to people. I wasn't like the nerd in the corner with the pocket protector and didn't talk to anybody. But I remember feeling very awkward around people all the time. I felt awkward in conversations. I felt like if I said anything, it was dumb. I remember feeling that quite a bit. And so it was like my senior year of high school where I knew that there was like a confidence deficit. I could feel it. And so it was a mental, it's an intentional direction where I literally said to myself, I'm going to be different this year. I'm going to speak up more. I'm going to talk more. And I remember talking more, and I think you want to get attention, right? And so I remember, you know, telling jokes a few times and disrupting class a few times. And in my senior year of high school, I got kicked out of class by a teacher for like the first time ever in my life. And I remember feeling like that was a badge of honor for me. I was like, yay, I got kicked out of class. So, I mean, I go to the principal's office. He's like, dude, what are you doing? I said, I got kicked out of class. But he's like, cut it out. And he sent me back to class. So, you know, so those are kind of like the beginnings of maybe coming out of a shell a little bit. And there was a chaplain my freshman year of college that saw me setting up keyboards to play for a choir. And he says to me, he pulls me aside and he says, Bobby, I see something inside of you. It's like you're behind these keyboards and you're hiding. I said, what do you mean? I'm playing for the choir. He's like, yeah, I don't know. There's something about you. I don't know you outside of this year, but there's something about you that says you should be out front leading,
okay,
rather than sitting behind the keyboard. And I was
okay.
kind of like, okay, whatever, man. So I just kind of, it stuck with me. And that summer, I decided I was going to start a group. And so, no, that was actually that was my sophomore year. That was my sophomore year of college. Yeah. So after that sophomore year of college, I decided I was going to start a singing group. I came back, started that group. That was the first. I started several groups after that, and you know, was kind of known as somebody that led several groups. Started to write music. We recorded, you know, a lot of different things. But yeah, that's kind of that background, man.
Over the years, as I've observed you and we've had the chance to interact with one another, I have found you to be a self-starter, that you don't kind of need other people to motivate you. And maybe you might ideate in the presence of others, but when it comes to starting, to use a biblical reference, casting your bread upon the waters, in my estimation, you do a phenomenal job at that. When we've talked and you'll say, hey man, you know, I was kind of, you know, foraging in this space. And then I was kind of like, oh, I'll start this or I'll start that, or you can start multiple things at a time. Having read John Acuff's book, Start, I think a general principle in life is a lot of people have thoughts, but they are afraid to start. In many ways, they're fearful of starting because of fear of failure. Help us to understand, how do you grapple with that? How do you overcome fear of failure? How do you learn from failure and kind of start things?
Yeah, well, you know, I think the experience of being a pastor's kid and always in the forefront has led me to live a part of my life afraid of failure, because you mess up, and unlike most other kids, it doesn't go under the radar.
Right.
It's like you're you know, front street.
Sure.
And so I just kind of had to find a space where, because inevitably we all mess up. And when you mess up, you kind of go through this stuff and you're like, everybody's looking at you. Everybody's talking about you. Your parents don't know what to say about you. I mean, it's all of this stuff. And, you know, as a kid, I was, you know, A student, always got the awards, et cetera, et cetera. So that was kind of expected of me. So it was like, I grew up out in front, being a smart kid. And so failure was like this fear that I had. And so it was kind of like when I got to college and I failed. I failed organic chemistry. I failed a class, right? And that was the first time that I had literally been in that position in my life. And I felt like it was like the end of the world at that time.
Speak, Bobby. Speak. I'm with you. I'm with you.
Right. I felt like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? I'm a science major. What am I gonna do? And my mom kind of pulled me aside and she was like, listen, is this what you want to do? And I said, I think so. And she said, well, I mean, you're not doing well here, and I'm not getting down on you. I'm just stating what the facts are. You're not doing well right here. So maybe let's start looking at some other things, because sometimes when you reach a point of failure, it can be an indicator that this may not be the space that is for you. So you got to kind of evaluate a little bit. And she's like, I'm not telling you not to push forward. I'm saying put something else, start exploring something else as well. And so with her guidance, I took on a history major as well. So I ended up graduating with dual majors in biology and history. So
really? Biology?
Yeah. Biology and history.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that conversation with my mom kind of said, it was almost like it gave me permission to kind of start exploring while understanding that my failure in anything wasn't anybody else's business, really. It was like, I had to deal with it, and I had to make choices about what I was going to do with that failure.
Right. Right.
So I think I started to embrace that. And it wasn't like this light switch just switched and I immediately got past failures. I mean, I still struggled. I mean, I would say up until you know, probably, I mean, dude, I'm late into my 40s at this point.
Sure.
You know, it's something that I still push through.
Right.
But you know, it's easier now than it was 5 years ago.
Right. You know, I heard someone once say that the older I've become, I haven't stopped failing. I've just learned to learn more from it. And I was laughing when you were sharing your story, because I remember failing a class in college as well. The only class I've ever failed. I was a junior in college, and that particular semester, really that year, had its own challenges. That's not an excuse, but just giving context to, you know, it's the second semester. I'm seeing it like I'm not going to pass this class. The teacher is like, Rich, let's talk about this. And I mean, it was kind of like, it was a crisis moment, you know, because you're not accustomed to it. And yet it did provide perspective, because, you know, at every level of academia, you have peers for whom failure is almost a badge of honor. You know, it's like, they don't deal with it the same way. It's kind of like, oh man, I got this D, or, you know, whatever, I'll take it again. That wasn't my story, but I was able to kind of empathize, and I was able to learn, listen, in life, you're going to have these moments again. It may not be in academics, but it will just be in life. Sometimes it'll be just starting and trying to accomplish something, but it prepares you for the next go at it. And speaking of next go, I consider you to be a serial entrepreneur. You have, and I say that with the most respect, because my background is, before, I guess, accepting the call to ministry, when I was in high school, middle school, going into high school, and people ask, well, what do you see yourself doing? I think I had heard, Bobby, the word entrepreneur somewhere, and I just started using that. And really, my big thing was, I wanted to open my own amusement park. Growing up in Florida, you know, minutes up the road from Disney, Busch Gardens. So I liked doing it as a kid. And I said, I think I would like doing it as an adult too, just in the business ownership side. But I didn't know any entrepreneurs. If I did, I didn't know that term. And since then, of course, I think it's become a little bit more popular in the societal conversation. You're one of the ones that I know who said, listen, at some point, a pivot was necessary. I kind of want to get there just by asking this bridge question. You mentioned you studied, ultimately graduating with biology and history. What were your early jobs after college?
So when I was in college, my senior year, I was in the mental health industry. I was working as a residential counselor for a mental health organization. After I graduated, I continued there for a couple of years and actually worked my way up to director of a department. After doing that, you know, that didn't end so great, but I was a teacher after that. So my career has been kind of like this smorgasbord of just like beautiful stuff, right? So while I'm doing the mental health, I am driving from my apartment to the place, and I keep passing this radio station. I go in one day, and long story short, the owner puts me on as an intern with the news anchor for the radio station. So I do a stint as news anchor for an AM radio station. So, I mean, and I absolutely loved it. And I like to, as I think back, that was really a seed for podcasting. It's really a seed for the communication thread of my life. And so I leave the mental health field and I start teaching. So I become a science teacher. I teach high school biology and physical science for 8 years. After that, I'm a faculty for an online university biology department for 2 years. While I'm teaching, I start a business in the gospel music industry where we're promoting artists online. We're interviewing, we're promoting, we have an online radio station, we got ad revenue coming in. I do that for a little bit. And while we're doing that, some of the artists that we're interviewing are independent artists, and we figure we find out they don't have websites. Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
Right. So I call my brothers. I'm like, yo, let's start a web development company. So we start developing websites for artists. And so we're doing both of these things. And, they're I don't know anything about managing a business
right
at this point. This is like back in the day, they didn't even really have Google at the time. They got like Ask Jeeves and Alta Vista.
Sure.
Right?
I remember those.
So, yeah. So, I mean, this is like 2001.
Okay.
So this is my genesis in business. So like you, as a kid, my concept of business owner was like, you own a dry cleaning store, you own a bodega, you own this corner store, whatever. The stuff like owning an organization, like owning a park, wasn't even in my concept of what owning a business is like, because I think somewhere deep down, I didn't know or think that my people, that I could own or be in charge of something that great or that big.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'm with you.
I'm a pastor's kid. The highest that I know is like, if you're good enough or you have the right connections, you can be a conference president.
Right. That's the pinnacle, right?
that's my frame of reference.
Sure.
That's my frame of reference. So starting this business where I'm interviewing people, and I'm getting backstage with artists, I'm doing all, and I'm just doing this. I have no frame of reference for this. But when I was a sophomore in high school, my dad sent me to work for this dude who owned a construction company that was a friend of his. And so I kind of saw it, but I didn't see it.
Right.
I knew he sent me, but I didn't. When I was a junior, my dad sent me to work for another friend of his who owned a pharmacy and a clinic. And his wife was the doctor at the clinic next door. So I saw it, but I didn't see it.
Come on now. Come on, Bobby.
Right?
Yeah.
So now I've got this business, and we're doing stuff, we're making a little bit of money, but I'm teaching full time.
Right.
So it's kind of a hobby. It's like the side hustle.
Right.
It's not the main thing. So we moved to Maryland in 2008, and 10 days after we get to Maryland, I lose my job teaching online.
Wow. Okay.
Right. So I lose that job. I mean, I forgot to mention before that, I did a stint as a real estate agent as well. Right. So
see y'all watching and listening. You thought I was playing when I said serial entrepreneur. No.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm here. I lose my job, and I'm doing the regular things that everybody does when they lose job. I'm, Monster, Indeed, Simply Hired, whatever. I'm sending out resumes. I'm not getting any bites. I'm not getting anything. I mean, I might have understood if I got interviews, but didn't get hired. Yeah. I didn't get response.
Yeah. And 2008 is like when the recession begins.
Yes. I'm getting nothing. Nothing. And I got, I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I gotta take care of my family. I gotta contribute to the household. I gotta lead. And I'm feeling emotionally like, what's going on here, God?
Yeah.
And I'm blaming God. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing to me?
That's real. That's real.
Yeah. So, right somewhere about September. So I lose my job in July, somewhere about September, October. I had met this guy, and he gave me, I'll shorten the story. He gave me $2,000 worth of software for free. Wow. He was a VP at a company. I met him online, never met this dude in person. We'd had like 2 or 3 conversations. He gave me this software, and it allowed me to start kind of messing around with developing courses or building e-learning, building online courses. So around January, I get a contract with a lady to develop courses for her classes at a university.
Right.
And so I do that. She gives me a couple of contracts. I get 2 or 3. I call a couple other places. I get hired to do some contracts for about 3 or 4 different clients. And after the third or fourth one, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, wheel. Mm-hmm.
So I start a company, I get it registered, and I'm like, we're gonna go.
Sure.
And so we start building courses. We're building courses, man. We're building courses. We ultimately end up building courses for like Barnes and Noble, for Johnson and Johnson, for Panda Restaurant Group, the company that owns the Chinese restaurants, Panda Express.
Sure.
And it's going good. I mean, we do a lot of things until about 2012, 2013. The company kind of blows up. I have a contract where a contractor uses up a bunch of our budget, and I end up having to go in to do a lot of the work ultimately for free and make a lot of decisions to try to recover inside of that don't work. And so the business ends up kind of blowing up at that point. So I end up having to go back to corporate.
Okay.
So I go back to corporate for 10 months, and after 10 months, I was working for an organization that was building online courses for a government entity, for DOD actually.
Sure.
And they were on an RFP. They were on a government contract. They lose the government contract, and the company closes.
Wow.
So I'm back by myself.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure it out. I tried to figure it out for a while, not working. My wife during this time is like, dude, you're a teacher. Why don't you go back to teaching? I'm like, nah, because at this point I have this taste of entrepreneurship.
Sure.
And I'm like, if I go back to teaching, that's kind of like a detour.
Right.
I got to figure out how to build this thing. Struggling. So I end up going back to another corporate gig. I go back to this corporate gig after 10 months. Again, 10 months. This company loses a $10 million contract. And so they have to let go all of their managers in this area. So I'm out again. So now I'm kind of like, okay, God, we just gonna roll.
Yeah.
We're just gonna do this thing. So I start building another company. I'm starting to train at this point. I had joined Toastmasters and started to learn about speaking, and started to dig around and just started to find opportunities to train and speak, and that started to grow. And so then that's where we are now, man.
Wow.
The company started to grow, and so now we got this training company that trains organizational leaders on communication, presentations, business storytelling, and we work with small business owners, helping them to increase their visibility through storytelling, especially on video. So that's been the journey, man.
So these opportunities ultimately emerge out of obstacles, and I don't want to romanticize obstacles. I think looking back, once the picture becomes a little prettier, it's like, oh, I kind of had to jump over these hurdles. But I'm sure on those days where you're having conversations with God, with your wife, with yourself, those aren't easy days. No. And many of them are probably perplexing because you just don't see the end. And I've shared this with you before, a significant portion of our audience is kind of between that 25 to 35 years of age where, you know, on the front side, I guess you're just kind of a few years removed from college, and then 35, you're kind of staring 40 at the face. You may not have had the best 10-year or so go since college. Speak to the person who's there right now and they're in their dark day. Who was instrumental in getting you through? You know, how did you kind of gather the wherewithal to say, this seems to keep happening, and I could kind of just throw caution to the wind, like you said, go back to what was secure. I've taught before, I'll teach again, but that was a critical moment where you said, I got to keep this going. Speak to that person who's there. What would you say to them to say, listen, man, you know, I know where you are, but here's where you can go.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to listening to your heart and listening to God in your heart. Okay. And knowing the voice is so important. It's so important because you're gonna have voices. You're gonna have family voices. You're going to have whispering voices on the outside that never speak to you directly, but you kind of get a sense of what they're saying, and it's not good. It's like, we don't understand why he's doing this. We don't understand what he does. He's like Tommy from Martin. You're going to hear those voices.
Come on, Bobby.
On the outside. You're also going to hear the voices on the inside that say, go to safety. And you're also going to hear the voice that says, trust me, I got you. And so the voice that says, trust me, I got you, it's not in isolation, just saying, trust me, I got you. It's kind of like this thing where I've given you these abilities, I've given you these gifts. And the reason I keep prompting you about these things, the reason I keep giving you ideas, the reason I keep allowing you to end up in certain spaces is because I'm going to bring you through that.
Yeah.
And so I had to be at a space where I had to then end up saying, you know what, if I'm going to keep being prompted, I mean, I don't believe in, I don't know who all of your audience is, but I don't believe that I serve a God who allows me to keep thinking about things or keeps allowing certain ideas or creativities to enter my mind.
Yeah.
I don't believe that he will put me in a space to be like, nah, you can't do that. You got to stay over right here in this structured environment that makes sense to everybody else and suffer with the ideas all the time, right? I cannot believe that. I believe that each of us, if you keep getting certain ideas, you keep ending up in certain spaces, if you keep having certain conversations, those are divine clues, man. And they don't always make sense. It's not like this thing that says, oh, I see, oh yeah, I should exactly be doing that. No, that's not how it works. But when you begin to assess, when you begin to look and you kind of see, oh yeah, man, I keep ending up in this space, there's something that's going on that you gotta look at. So what I had to do, the biggest thing that I did was I started to really intentionally seek mentorship.
Okay.
And so, I chose the church that I went to because I knew two things. Number one, it was a good place for my family to be, but I also knew that there were business owners there who could serve as mentors.
Come on now, come on.
So I'll call the names. Lois Peters was a fantastic mentor, is a fantastic mentor for me. Robert Wallace was a mentor for me. And when you say mentors, it's not always going to be like somebody where you raise your hand and you're like, hey, I need a mentor. They're like, okay, cool, I got you. Come on over here. Let's have a conversation. Right? Listen, Bob Wallace, I had to chase him for 3 years to have a conversation.
Wow. Come on, Bobby.
Yeah. Right. I had to chase him for 3 years to sit down in his office to have a conversation. But I was like, I need to speak to this dude. I need to have a conversation with this dude. And it wasn't like I said, here these 6 questions that I have a list of. Literally, when I got to his office, I wasn't even fully clear on what I wanted to ask him. I just knew that I needed to be in his space. Come on, somebody.
Yes, sir.
Right. I just knew that I needed to be in his presence to get some of the overflow, to get some stuff that, and he ended up telling me stories. Like when he started his business, he was like, I'm an engineer, right? And I think this way logically. And he was like, he got to a point where he said to his wife, I want to do this. And she was like, okay. And he was like, once I got the permission, I had to make some stuff work because, it wasn't working initially. So one of the things he said to me, Bobby, he said, listen, you've got to get to the point where something begins to work. And this was marriage advice as well as business advice. He said, you've got to get to the point where something works. So that really pushed me. I was like, oh, it's gotta work.
Come on.
It has got to work.
Yes, sir. Woo.
So, and when I say work, it's not like this, okay, nope, yep, we're making $5 million. It's working to the point where your wife, your spouse, people can see there's progress.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not like big progress, but it's enough progress. And when you're focused on creating that progress, it's them seeing you like so committed to that dream, so committed to that purpose, right? That you're willing to go through all of the crazy and whatever people are saying about you to reach even a small inkling of success. Right. And so, you know, I mean, I remember the day, man. I mean, I'm driving to New Jersey and my wife and I were in the car and we're you know, we usually have great conversation, but this happened this day, we were quiet. And we're driving, you know, music's playing and we're driving and she turns to me and she's like, you know, babe, you're doing good. And brother, when I tell you, I mean, that moment is etched in my mind, in my heart, in my memory, because I wanted to literally bawl at that moment. For sure. Because my wife saw me. She saw me in that moment. And I was like, man, okay, yeah. So now we're at the space where, you know, we're still growing. Things are not like perfect. I mean, it's not like we don't have any business struggles, but now the words that come out of her mouth are like, babe, yeah, we're going to make it through this. We're going to do this. We're going to blah, 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 blah. We're, you know, it's not like go back to that. It's what are we going to do to get through this? You know, she's like, babe, you my retirement. Babe,
it will work.
Yeah, she's like, you know, her words are like, when this really takes off, when we get to this space, when the business looks like this, she's like, literally, she doesn't always have the specifics on it, but her language ideates along with me right now.
For sure.
So, man, yeah, I don't know who that was for. But man, you just gotta trust the dreams that are placed in your heart. Ooh. Trust them and know that if you allow it to be okay, it will be okay. Yeah.
You know, you spoke about focus, you spoke about trusting the dreams placed in your heart. I'll never forget being in your office. And just as you mentioned, sometimes mentorship isn't always, you know, direct and constant access to an individual. There's distant mentorship. And then there are moments where you have intimate mentorship. Seeds are planted, sometimes not with words, but just by being in a space, in a setting, and you see things. And I'm sitting in your office downstairs in the basement. And I remember just seeing on one of the walls, board. And on the board, there were about 3 sections of goals. One of them said, you know, here are my financial goals. Here are the amount of engagements I'm going to aim for. And I'm saying to myself, you know, at that stage in my life, okay, I'm thinking things will come for a person just being around. What I saw there was like, yeah, sure, that may be true. But what can also be true is I can actually set goals of what I hope to happen. And if they don't all happen, that's okay. But what if none ever happened? Because I never said, I'm dreaming, I'm reaching, I'm aiming, I'm going. It keeps it ahead of me. Man, I literally saw that. And I said to myself, okay, I get it. I get it. That it can be both and it doesn't have to be either or. And so I shared that story in connection with what you've just shared, that there were times, I'm sure, where even in pursuing these goals, naming them, you know, many times people won't be privileged to the private aspirations that we have. And as we're pursuing them, like you mentioned, those whispers, man, people can kind of be sending them from places of ignorance. Like they have no idea what we're aiming for. And along the way, sometimes I'm sure there has to be a pause and you'll say, you know what, let's keep the main thing. And when you have a spouse, when you have children, when you have parents, siblings, those persons in your system of support who say, hey, man, I see you, keep going, you're doing good. Bro, that hit me, you know, and I feel that because we need that. Now, out of that, I've seen, in fact, before that conversation in my office where you said, hey, man, have you thought about podcasting? What are some things you want to do? We actually met at Miracle City Church.
Yeah.
Service was done. We were with the
Yeah.
Starlings. You said, hey man, I heard that you're coming to our church as an associate. Here's my name. Here's my card. If there's any way I can help, let me know. I remember that. I could actually see it in my mind where we were
Wow.
standing. And
Yeah.
since then, I've seen that, man. I don't know whether you try to do this. I'm sure it's just natural. That's my position. I think it's natural. You're a helper, man. You want to see other people grow, become the best version of themselves. Business-wise, you focused in on organizational leaders. So I want to ask you, how do you go about helping leaders? Communication and leadership go hand in hand. How do you go about helping leaders communicate with courage?
Yeah. Well, I think the story that I told earlier about my voice being muted at 2 years old or 2.5 years old, I think it starts out with you understanding what you believe. And so I shared this last week. I was speaking for the Maryland Workforce Department. They had a conference, and I said, like, at the end, you've got to know what you believe. And I believe, because of my life, because of what happened to me, because of the things that I've gone through, I believe that everyone's words deserve to be heard.
Come on.
That's my core belief, right? And so how that plays out, varies. It plays out through keynote speaking. It plays out through workshops. It plays out through online courses. It plays out through conversations. But I believe that everyone's words deserve to be heard. And so what I do is an outgrowth of that belief. And so to answer your question about leaders, the first thing that I ask them is, like, what do you believe?
Wow.
What do you believe that lights you up? What do you believe that serves as the foundation of how you interact with everybody? Because what you believe, whether you say it out loud or not, whether you've been able to clearly articulate it in your mind or not, each of us has a core belief that permeates how we operate, that determines how we interact each day.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And so,
Sure.
You were talking about sitting in my office and seeing these things like on my wall. I believe that everyone's words deserve to be heard. And so in order to shield myself from what others had to say, I had to create my own space of belief. I had to create my own space to seed my mind constantly. So if I'm in my office, this is a no negativity zone, right? I mean, I'm in my space here, and I wish I could turn my camera. I mean, I can probably do it later. I can actually, do it. Let me not, like, waste your time. Just, but I mean, I turn to the right here, right? And there's a sign that says, "Good morning, millionaire."
Yes, sir.
I turn to my right. There's a text on the wall that says, Deuteronomy 28:12, "The Lord will open for you his good storehouse, the heavens, to give rain to your land in its season, and to bless all the work of your hand. And you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow."
Come on.
Right? I've got that sitting on my wall. I've got a text, I got an index card that says, "Confidence. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." Philippians 4:13, right? I got another sign. "I am God's powerfully created son." I've got a building that God placed in my brain several years ago that I actually had designed and drawn out by a CAD designer that I know that he's going to bring to life. Yeah. That building is drawn. It's right there on my wall, right? Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Marianne Williamson, that sits on my wall. So my space is a space that has been curated and built to help me be courageous and to fulfill that belief. Because if I can't share my voice, if I can't unmute my voice, if I can't look the book, right? If I can't find my voice, then how can I encourage others to do the same? Right? And so I build my space, and my question for leaders is, like, what do you believe? Yeah. You say you want people to do certain things, you're looking for certain results, but what is it that you believe? And if you can clearly define that, if you can articulate that, even if you don't have all of the final words, because it may be something that evolves over time, but if you can begin to define that now, you can begin to confidently move forward. You can begin to repeat certain things because confidence isn't a switch that you flip on and off. It's my definition of confidence is repetition with the expectation of success, right? So you repeat behaviors, you repeat these things, and you become more confident. And as people see that confidence, as people see that belief, as they begin to connect with that belief, now they begin to connect with you because they're connecting with and they begin to connect with your vision, right? Because they're connected with a piece of you that is intimately tied to this vision, this view, this image, this movie that you want to create in the world.
Sure. Man, at this stage in the game, and there are years left to go for you, I firmly believe that all that you've articulated is and will continue to catapult you into spaces where you have the opportunity to thrive. Up until this point, if you could choose one, and I'm sure there are many, but if you could just elaborate on one, what venture are you most proud of? Was there an idea that came to fruition? Was there a business that thrived? It can even be a moment, something in your journey up until this point where you can say, Rich, when I think about this, it tells me, brother, go on one more day.
Man, there are many, and I don't know that I have one that stands out like drastically above the others. Okay. But I do think if we're talking about podcasting, so we're going back to the core here. Sure. I remember starting a podcast, and this was like was it my first or my second? But I believe it was my first podcast. And my goal for the podcast was to have conversations with people that I would not ordinarily be able to speak to, so I could learn from them. And so I started to call up some people, and I just started to have conversations with people. But I was also thinking about a caliber of person. And when I say that, I don't mean to minimize anybody, but I remember that first business, right? So that first business, I'm interviewing artists. So I'm interviewing gospel artists. So I'm speaking to Jay Moss. I'm speaking to Fred Hammond. I'm speaking to Kirk Franklin. I'm speaking to Donnie McClurkin. I'm speaking to Maurette Brown Clark. I'm speaking to Tina and Erica from Mary Mary. I'm speaking, so I'm like little old me, speaking to these people, going to a concert, able to get backstage and say, hey, how you doing? And they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, you're that guy. Wow. Right? Yeah. So I'm now thinking like, okay, I was able to do that. And for me, it was like nothing. It wasn't a big deal. And I still to this day don't necessarily, some of my friends look at it like, oh my gosh, you were able to do that. And I'm like, yeah, it was, whatever. It wasn't a big deal. Right? Yeah. But it kind of was a big deal. I think maybe one of the things that God has done with me as well is sometimes I don't focus on what I've been able to do because I believe it will slow me down from what I need to get done. Okay. Okay. I'm with you. I'm with you. So I start this podcast, and I see this guy named Tom Ziglar. Online. I don't know if you've ever heard the name Zig Ziglar. Zig Ziglar,
yes. I've heard Zig Ziglar.
Tom is Zig's son.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So so Zig Ziglar has passed, but Tom is his son, and he's the owner of the Ziglar organization. Sure. He's the CEO of the Ziglar organization. I'm like, man, I want to speak to this guy. I want to have him on my podcast. And so I reach out to him on Twitter, and he agrees to come on the podcast, and we have a fantastic conversation. We have a fantastic podcast, and we begin a relationship that way. And so I think while that may be a small moment, it's like this thing that reminded me that all of these people in the world, they're just people. Sure. And you can have conversations, you can speak, and God has created you not to be any less than any of them. Yeah. You just got to trust and believe that you are as great, and in some cases, depending on what the skill set is or the area is, in some areas greater than some people who have maybe more visibility and shine than you at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But you have every right to be on the same stage, to be on the same platform. And sometimes you may need to create the platform so that they can be there with you.
Whenever I've had the chance to have those moments, specifically in podcasting, having conversations with persons that I saw on television, persons in business positions that I never thought I'd speak with, I always think of you and Pierre Quinn, two of the early influencers in my podcasting journey, who said, hey, yo, you need to do this, or you can do this. And so I think about that. I want to leave you with a couple of final questions. And this is, again, more personal introspection. This is kind of a question that I ask every guest speaking to the future. If you can send yourself a text message 10 years into the future, you are sending Bobby Kennedy a text message 10 years in the future. What does that text message say?
Man, it's saying, bro, you did it. The building is around, and it's making a great difference in the lives of people in this community.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward not only to the end of the 10-year journey, but the journey there. Share with us, if you would, man, how we can connect with you, follow you, continue to learn more from you, products that we can invest in. I see there behind you, you've got a number of books that are available right now. So, man, social media handles, website, events that are upcoming, anything you want us to know.
Man, I really try to make it easy. You can connect with me on all platforms as Robert Kennedy 3. Okay. LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm there. I just opened up a TikTok account, but
it's gonna be great. This will work. I
haven't done anything there. Yes, yeah. So there, my website is robertkennedy3.com. And the biggest place where you can connect with me and learn more about how we serve, how we help people to grow is inside of the Storytellers Growth Lab. So you can go to storytellersgrowthlab.com to get connected with me there.
Hey, man, I appreciate you taking time to talk with us. I've been inspired.
Yes, sir.
I know that you have been inspired, those watching and those listening. You know, I heard a song recently by a country artist named Cody Johnson, and the song is called Till You Can't. And here's the chorus. It simply says, if you've got a chance, take it. Take it if you've got the chance. If you've got a dream, chase it, because a dream won't chase you back. If you're going to love somebody, hold them as close and as strong and as long as you can till you can't. Our special guest is using his bags of gold until he can't, and they are growing and inspiring and changing the lives of people like you and like me. I hope that as you have listened to our special guest, Robert Kennedy III, you are willing to take all that you've learned and live more abundantly with it. That's all we have for this episode of The Living Room. I'm your host, Richard Martin. Our special guest has been Mr. Robert Kennedy III. Until next time, continue to listen, continue to learn, continue to live. Peace.